Welcome to our working group tour, where today we are hearing from the Sustainable Finance Working Group, led by Mita Kahari of the University of Texas and Jaap Bos of the University of Maastricht. So firstly, thank you for joining us, because what time is it in your part of the world, I wonder? Early morning, so all the more grateful to you for making this time for us today. So please, Mita, if you'd like to introduce yourself, we can't wait to hear.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for the invitation. We're very happy to be here. I'm Mita Kahari. I'm on the faculty at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm actually a finance faculty by background, but I've had a checkered career in all three sectors. And as a result, I teach corporate sustainability, impact investing, and sustainable finance as well, and impact entrepreneurship. I'm also the managing director of the Global Sustainability Leadership Institute at the university, which is housed in the McCombs School of Business, but is a cross-campus institute for education, experiential learning, and research. Besides that, I think I'm a dedicated sustainability advocate and spend considerable time in my community as well with nonprofits and other and entrepreneurs who are invested in sustainability. Yeah.
Yes. Jaap Bos, Professor of Banking and Finance at Maastricht University. Also a member of the steering committee, as it's called, of the Impact and Sustainable Finance Faculty Consortium. Former central banker. I've done research on sustainable finance. I teach in sustainable finance. We have a sustainable finance master at Maastricht, which is completely dedicated to sustainable finance. And I have some consulting experience as well for local and national government. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaap. And I should say I'm also part of the steering committee of the Impact and Sustainable Finance Faculty Consortium, which is the UN Prime working group on sustainable finance. And we're both here to share a little bit about our work and to take questions about it if anyone is curious. So thank you again. And I am going to start talking a little bit about this group and what we do. I hope everyone can see the slides that I'm sharing. So the Impact and Sustainable Finance Faculty Consortium is really about sharing research and practice in the field of impact investing, sustainable finance, and I'll speak a little bit about it in a minute. And really, these are not different spaces, it's very nuanced what the difference between impact finance and sustainable finance is. We are a community of educators in the space. Many of us are teachers of finance and of impact investing and sustainable finance. Some of us are researchers. Increasingly, more researchers have joined as Jaap is doing both. And we are a sort of a growing resource for educators to share and learn from each other, our educational resources and resources for research as well. We are, I'm sorry, can't seem to move. There you go. So Megan, our fearless leader, is sick today and was not able to join us. So Jaap and I are going to manage the show for her. We have a steering committee of many more members. We are now 7 members. We're from different universities. And Dave Chen, who is sort of one of the thought leaders behind this, Jaap, of course, and then Sean Cole from Harvard, Lloyd Kurtz from Northwestern, Caroline Flammer from Columbia, Hong from Singapore Management University. Who am I missing? Yeah, I think that's it.
Carlos, Mexico.
Carlos, of course, Carlos Vargas, who is at Monterrey. And so our committee is also very international, which is representative of the flavor of our membership as well. We have now 450 plus members. We started with 40-ish members in 2017, 2018, and have grown tremendously since then, really organically, not with a serious search out, but mostly because the field expanded and mostly because more and more people started teaching sustainable finance in various schools. These are faculty that teach in business schools, in public policy schools, in law schools. The only condition for joining the consortium is that you provide a syllabus of a course that you're teaching in impact and sustainable finance. So because the idea is that we share these resources. These 450 plus members represent over 220 universities around the world and come from 40 plus countries.
So maybe I can say something, Mita, about
Yes, go ahead.
the philosophy behind our meetings. So our key meeting is every year in June. It's a physical meeting, 3 days. We host other online meetings as well, but more when necessary or when deemed important. And I think the starting philosophy of our consortium is very much in line with what everybody who's present here probably subscribes to. It's the idea that in order to sort of increase sort of the urgency, but also the level and the quality of teaching, what we need to do is sort of not just improve the best, but improve everybody. And the way that we can do that is learn from each other. So as Mita already explained, your ticket, the entry price for joining our group is very simple. You share your syllabus, but in return for that, you get access to everybody else's syllabi as well. So we're all about sharing information. We do the same thing nowadays also with case studies. So we started last year, and we've built an online tool that members have access to that allows you access to, I think it's over 1,200 now, case studies in sustainable finance, broadly defined, and it's searchable. So if you want to look for a case study in sub-Saharan Africa that involves water, you can look for that. If you're looking for a case study that involves sustainable, regenerative farming in the US, you can look for that as well. And so even though we have a steering committee, I think we see ourselves more as a platform. We provide some guidance, but mainly we're a platform that allows people who want to share their best practices, but maybe also their challenges with others to learn from each other and hopefully thereby improve everybody's quality of teaching.
One of the things I'll follow up and say is that it is really sustainable finance is often taught in schools as an elective, and the goal is really to help more students get into the area and understand that it's an integral part of finance, and to not have it as a simple add-on for those who somehow are attracted to the idea of working in finance for accomplishing some of the climate action goals. And so our hope is that through the sharing of resources and providing a forum for faculty to share other experiences as well within their schools, that we will be able to continue the sort of the advocacy of sustainable finance materials in regular finance courses, because otherwise students often take these courses as an add-on late in their, say, 2-year master's program, and it often does not benefit them or society in general when we're not teaching sustainable finance integrated with regular finance. So we hope that that will help more students who are in master's programs understand that the idea of these interconnected societal and environmental challenges is not something is not a niche concept for especially business schools. We sort of need to be thinking about this as part of the core curriculum.
Yeah, maybe to give some background on how we see this and what we do, what we mean that we talk about teaching. I think broadly speaking, we tend to focus on three different things. One is topics. So what are the important topics in impact and sustainable finance? And one of the things we'll do with around topics, for example, is we commonly have a session called How I Teach This. So we'll take a topic that's important, that has risen to the forefront in the last year, and we'll invite a couple of people to say, okay, how do you actually teach this in the classroom? And of course, it's especially topics that are sometimes very difficult to teach in a classroom setting, either because they're politically very sensitive, or because they're very complex, or because there's not a lot of material available. And so we try to sort of, again, show best practice. So topics. The second one is methods. So how do you actually go about working in sustainable finance, teaching sustainable finance? What is the key sort of, what are the tools that you need in order to operate in that area? And so for that reason, even though we're teaching focused, we always have a research session, for example, as well, where we actually say, okay, this is the main new findings that we found, in research. This is how research can inform what happens in the classroom. And then a third big pillar is standards, because in sustainable finance, impact investing, they tend to be really, really important. So if we're going to talk about impact, if we're going to talk about possible trade-offs between, let's say, financial returns and impact, we need to try at least to agree on what is impact and what is sustainable finance, and what works and what doesn't, and how do we measure that. And so we always talk to a lot of practitioners as well, and invite them into the conference to talk about, for example, what's happening in terms of ratings for sustainable finance. So those are the three things that we tend to, the three building blocks of our conferences: topics, methods, and standards.
Great. And one of the things that helps, that kind of approach has helped with, is also for our faculty then to be able to talk to other faculty who might want to be teaching this, but are uncomfortable talking about it because it's not something that anyone has learned 30 years ago. It is something that we've all had to pick up. Many of us came out of PhD programs when we weren't discussing these kinds of issues. And so that reluctance to teach something that you're not 100% comfortable with is something that we are trying to overcome with this kind of with these kinds of convenings, because not only are our faculty more comfortable teaching, but when they do well in the classroom, that benefits everyone and helps other faculty feel more confident when they have some materials from us as well. So I guess I'll continue and talk a little bit about what we're trying to do here beyond just teaching faculty. And of course, the opportunity is that we have all these young leaders who are going out into the world, and their master's degrees, their undergraduate degrees are their opportunity to learn all of this and feel comfortable with it as leaders right from the beginning of their careers. Their careers are going to span all of these issues over the next 50 years. And if the faculty are comfortable in the classroom with teaching, if there are more faculty doing research in the area, we will also be able to train future business leaders in these challenges and provide them with the tools and knowledge and confidence to address them in their own work.
So to follow up on that, one of the things that we've done in the past, and that was very successful, is invite alumni of some of the programs being represented at the conference who have had successful careers in the field to come back and share with everybody in the room, what was the most valuable thing, what were the most valuable things that I learned when I was studying sustainable finance, impact investing, and also looking back, what do I think was missing, and what do I think should be included in a modern curriculum? So we're trying to sort of close the loop in that respect.
Yeah, and from that perspective, we also bring practitioners besides our alumni who can tell us a little bit more about what we missed or what they missed and what we might still be missing. We also recognize that many of our members are really adjunct teachers. They're in their real job practicing in the investment industry, and some of them are corporate leaders as well. And that provides us a very rich set of talents that are that bear upon our convenings as well. We learn a lot from them, and we often bring other practitioners as well to talk about what's happening currently in the space and what's working and what's not working. And that's kind of unique to our working group, to our specific consortium. I often attend other convenings and conferences, and they're very specific to academic research. They're very specific to maybe there's an education conference talking about pedagogy and so on. But this is sort of a great space for both teaching and research to come together and practitioners to come together to really talk about how we connect academic work to state of the art in the world today. So really, I think that's the value that our members get. There's very little we do for finance academics usually in the area of teaching particularly. And this kind of brings in a way of, we are educating ourselves on how to teach sustainable finance. We are educating ourselves about the latest research in sustainable finance, and we're educating ourselves on the latest practices in industry. And we're putting all of that together in the classroom to educate future leaders. And that's the uniqueness of this particular group of finance academics. So it's a very big tent. We have, when we say we have members from 40 plus countries, we really mean it. There are many, many members from Europe and North America, of course, but we have a huge contingent from Latin America. They've hosted their first convening last year. Carlos Vargas is our member on the steering committee from Latin America, and with his guidance and Megan's, we have they've hosted a convening specifically for Latin American issues. It's that big, that particular group has gotten that big. We have members from Africa, from Asia, and that has brought us a very unique perspective. Last year, we held our convening in Singapore, and we saw firsthand how Asia is tackling these issues. It was a great opportunity for our members to interface with not just each other, but also see Singapore as a society in action for sustainability. Jaap, do you want to say anything more about that convening specifically?
I think maybe not about that convening specifically, but what has happened over the years is that I think for practical purposes, but also as a matter of principle, we've become more and more global, not just in terms of memberships, but also in terms of topics.
Mm-hmm.
The role played around the globe by indigenous people, for example, is something that when we started was not on the agenda, but now quite literally is. And the same, so what we start to see more and more is everybody from where they're coming from geographically, but also in terms of the background, brings something to the table. We try to let that be reflected in the program for the consortium meeting, so that everybody. So that you get, one of the reasons why I like to go there is because I get perspectives that I don't get from my own classroom or from the literature or from anywhere else. It gives you an opportunity to get into contact with people that that you normally would not be able to get in contact with. And there's often this sort of exchange. Somebody has a piece of knowledge that another person really would like to make use of, but the other person may have some experience in terms of what's going on the ground where he or she lives that is unique to get into the classroom. So a lot of sort of guest speakers in different courses are being taken care of in the meeting. Hey, you want to give a talk in my course? Yeah, do you want to give a talk in my course? So that's one of the sort of follow-ups that typically happens after the meetings.
Yes, and we've consciously tried to work on programming that is reflective of what's going on all over the world, not just with, there's always this idea in finance, especially, it's always been North American and Europe centric. We've tried really hard to see other perspectives in finance as well. And that's been really fun. And we do more and more of that as time goes by. So a little bit about who should join this consortium. We are, as we said, a big tent, and if anyone is at all teaching any sustainable finance course, and when I think let's step back, Jaap, and maybe talk a little bit about impact versus impact investing and sustainable finance. Would you like to share a little bit about why we call it impact and sustainable finance?
I don't know what I could say about that. I mean, maybe you have a more precise answer.
Yes,
my main take on it. Well, there's two things, I guess. One is we try to be as sort of as broad and as inclusive as possible when it comes to the field. So we're not going to be very precise or very. We don't want to get into discussions about definitions, basically. So if you think that you're doing sustainable finance or impact investing or impact finance, then you're welcome. The other thing that explains also the name, and I think also the way that the meetings work is, well, I guess it's two things. One is a lot of people who teach in this space have a lot of practical experience. So they're professors of practice, or they give guest lectures, but they work in the field. So that creates a different dynamic already. And the second thing is, as you said already, Mita, a lot of teaching in this space, interestingly enough, is not done necessarily at business schools or in economics programs. It's done at forestry schools or in engineering schools, or in a lot of places where if you look at the literature, where you wouldn't necessarily look for sustainable finance, but where there's a great interest and where you have students also with a different background who, if you think of an engineering school, for example, have great technical skills, but they don't necessarily think in terms of incentives or asymmetric information or any of the other concepts that we think of in economics and in finance. And so for that reason, I think we keep it very broad, and we talk about impact, we talk about sustainability, and we talk about finance, and we put all of that together.
That's a good point. And I think it's a bit of a legacy title as well, because, again, we wanted to be a big tent, and people refer to this work in different ways. And depending upon the lens through which they are coming, they might resonate more with the impact investing world, or others might resonate more with sustainable finance. And really, the distinction between these is blurring over time, but historically, impact investing has been much more about really about impact and working with projects and companies that were created primarily for with impact baked into their founding. So you're working on the mitigating some environmental issue. You're working on a product that is environmentally friendly or is produced for underserved populations. And then came an entire interest in institutional investing in legacy companies that may or may not have been founded or selling products that are necessarily sustainable, but are trying to mitigate the impacts on the environment of what they've been doing already. And that became a bigger and bigger field. And so people come at it from different lenses, but ultimately we all have to be talking about what is the impact of either one of these approaches? And the ESG movement took off in the larger public securities markets. And that sort of became a bigger market dollar-wise. But we've always asked the question, ultimately, what is the impact? How are we mitigating or adapting to climate change and so on? So, really, it's more about, as Jaap said, if you think you're teaching any form of sustainable impact finance, please reach out to us, because we try to keep this as open as possible. And as long as your work relates to some form of finance, we are more than happy for you to share your viewpoints, because we learn from everyone in this consortium. So
Let me
if
add
you
something. Can I
Yes,
come back to that, Mita? So, because
Yes,
I think I'm going to sort of contradict myself, but I think one thing that's important, and let me try to say it as precisely as possible, is that I don't know to what extent the people attending this meeting have a finance background or know about finance, but finance is a very specific field, of course, and it's not known necessarily for being the most empathetic. It's not known for being the most inclusive. It is known for being sort of almost like a hard science in terms of sometimes excessive emphasis on techniques and equations and math. And so in order to have a seat at the table in whatever context that is, teaching, practice, when it comes to impact and sustainable finance, you need to sort of empower students with enough tools so that they can speak finance. And so I think that sort of informs a lot of our discussions in the steering committee about what we want to do at the conference and what we asking people in the community to share, because there's not a single person in our community who is not there because they believe really, really strongly in making the world a better place and improving sustainability and having impact. That's not where sort of the challenge lies. The challenge typically lies in having a seat at the table. In other words, being able to bring your interest and your motivation when it comes to impact and sustainability and infuse that with knowledge about impact finance, about impact investing and sustainable finance, but especially with the finance part of that also, so that you can actually really have the impact. The impact is not necessarily there because you want to do good. The impact is there because you're able to speak the language and in a setting convince others also that what you want to do is worth thinking about at the very least. And so that's especially for given the background of the students, as I just mentioned, that's something that we always try to keep in our minds when we're putting together the agenda for the consortium meetings, that it has to be it's really a balance between the first two words that you see on the screen, impact and sustainability, and the last one, finance, because you need a balance between all of those things in order to really have impact, pun intended.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jaap. So I'll continue with just a brief discussion of who should join. As I said, anyone who's a university faculty member. And again, this is really, we do want to keep it to universities, not just not open this up to people teaching one-off workshops somewhere because they happen to be in the impact finance space. So anyone who is teaching undergraduate or graduate classes, again, whatever you call it, whichever school you're in on campus, as long as it is about finance for environmental or social impact, please reach out to us and consider applying to be a member. And we really are, all you have to do is submit go to our platform, our website, and there is a place where you can join. You can upload your syllabus, and that's how you join. It's very simple. We have the platform is closed to only members, and so feel comfortable that your materials are not going to go outside into areas where someone might. It's really the goal of this is to improve our instruction, our pedagogy, to help all of us in the consortium learn and grow together with other members. It is not a publicly available platform. And so, and that's all you are required to disclose, just your syllabus. And we try to get members to update their syllabus, of course, every year on the platform. Our main convening is in June, usually, and it often takes place at Kellogg at Northwestern. We typically have it in that last third week of June. That changes a little bit. It's a 2-day consortium, 2 days plus a dinner before meeting. This is a little bit about, these are a few pictures from our previous consortium. That's our steering committee, besides Sean, I think. And so, that's your, hopefully you will join, and we try to make some funding available for travel, but it's not, we're not at a point where we can support every single member because we're getting bigger and bigger, but certainly think about it. And then this is an agenda for, let me see, this is our, this year's agenda for this year's meeting is on June 22nd to, I should move this back. From June 22nd to June 24th this year, we will meet at Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois. And we'll go through the typical 2.5-day session on June 22nd. It starts with a dinner in the evening. And for the next 2 days, this is our agenda. This year, and every year we spend several months curating this agenda. We start thinking about what are the big issues that have surfaced around the world. And our agenda follows that. Of course, this year, there have been so many changes in the world that we've had to make continuous changes in the agenda, but we'll continue to be flexible. The way we think about that, about the consortium, the convening agenda typically is surfacing some of the big topics for plenaries, and that you'll see, our first plenary of the 2 days is about the current movement in the world and a world of geopolitics and what that's looking like for sustainability. We have another plenary on practitioner perspectives. On the second day, we're talking about, these are the kinds of more philosophical discussions, philosophical and practical really, of high-level issues in sustainability. So for instance, thinking about sustainability from a systems level perspective. In finance, we tend to think about a lot of it in relation to how investors can make maximum returns for a given level of risk, or how managers of companies how we need to create arrangements where managers of companies will act in shareholder interests. We don't necessarily ask the question, what is the systematic problem we are trying to solve? And that is the big shift in finance when you think about it from a sustainability perspective. We have these big planetary issues, and we have these big societal issues that are interconnected with that. So if you take that problem as given, and then you start asking, what are the financial arrangements we can create to solve these issues? Then you're looking at a very different perspective than saying, okay, let's take existing theories of finance and commit ourselves to just living within that context, whether it is the principal agent problem of managers and companies, or it is the asset pricing models that define investing from practitioners in the industry. So that's the focus of our second day, talking about market failure and systems level view of finance. We have planetary boundaries that we've overshot. We have climate science and climate models that tell us a certain story. And then we're asking, well, what can we do systematically in finance to support the movement of the world towards those goals, whether they are decided globally by various global conventions, or whether they are determined really just by science. And how do we combine those two? A lot of what we do in finance is about risk, and climate modeling goes sort of well beyond that. So we can't really even know the outcomes or even project multiple outcomes. We have even more ambiguity than that. So we're trying to bring a little bit more about that and to ask the question, how can the financial system support support addressing environmental and societal issues, rather than take the more micro view of the corporation as it exists. And so we're talking about, so again, the next plenary is about applying these risk models to the climate world. What does that look like we've had asset pricing theories and portfolio theories that we've had since the mid-50s, and we've used those for so long without very many changes. And so the question we're trying to ask in these kinds of issues, and researchers are beginning to ask as well, is how do we tweak those models, or do we need new models of asset pricing and investment theories as well to really make finance suitable for all of these investments? And those are some of the bigger philosophical questions we ask there. And then our breakouts on both days are more tactical questions about how we teach certain topics. So for instance, the LATAM group, the Capitulo LATAM group gets together themselves to talk about Latin American issues. We have case teaching, we come up with, and these are sort of 1-hour sessions that run concurrently. You go to any one of the sessions that you're interested in. These breakouts are sort of working simultaneously. There is, carbon markets is a big issue now, the question of biodiversity and how it relates to climate or not. That is a big issue. The world is not just, the big issues are not just about climate per se. There are, other things like water and land management issues. And what does that look like? And how does finance support this area, which is a little more undefined? We talk a lot about that. We talk about we have a space for researchers to meet. Sometimes that can get so technical. And so it's nice to have people who are interested in research talk about the, picking apart asset pricing and so on. And so on the second day, we have breakouts that are about teaching with cases. Impact measurement and management is a hot topic every year, because that field is still developing. We've talked a lot about ESG investing and so on. That's what the media covers typically. But the real question is, if finance and the financial system is to address climate and other issues like biodiversity and so on, as well as societal issues, how do we know that we are making any change? How do we know and compute quantitatively as well as qualitatively what changes are occurring? And we've seen a lot of this work in the nonprofit sector before. Measurement and evaluation has been a common theme for a long time, but impact measurement was really not, was developed a little bit later, and we have some very great tools for this now. And we talk about those and the most recent developments within that every year. Systems level finance as well. How do you actually go about doing it? And then our ending plenaries this year are, again, really bigger topics. So questions like, what is actually changing the behavior of corporations? What are we hearing? What is it that will change the way we think about running businesses in a way that can continue to be, allow them to be profitable, but do so sustainably? Geopolitics, of course, will be a big topic this year. And the concept of blended finance for economic development is becoming a big issue as well. The idea here, of course, for those of you who are working in different fields, finance has always historically had sort of this concept of the market rate return. If we invest, and a typical investor would say, if I invest in this asset, I should be able to achieve a return on this asset that is comparable to an investment on a similar asset. When I say similar, an asset that has similar risk. And that is the market rate of return for that investor. But the question for impact investing is really about how do we make these projects or companies investable by these investors who are seeking market rate returns, but where it will take a while for that project or company to become big enough, strong enough to provide those market rates. So there's a huge role for philanthropy and for investors who are willing to take less than market rate. Philanthropists, of course, are making grants. And many times for instance, if you take an entrepreneur who is just starting off, has a great idea, but is going to take a while, it's going to address a climate change potentially problem. It's a technology that's going to take a little while to develop. How do you make it investable? Well, philanthropists can come in early, give it some grants, give it some technical assistance. There can be some family offices that are not answerable to other institutions and who can provide loans at a lower than market rate and eventually take the project to a point where it can be investable because it's earning market rates of return. And so there are many ways we can combine these, even contemporaneously in time or staggered over time, to make this kind of finance work. So that's sort of the idea of blended finance, and you've all seen it. Many of you have worked in development finance. You see these kinds of arrangements all the time internationally, but it's becoming a flourishing field in mainstream finance as well. So we're really, about building the system for sustainable finance to the extent that we can as educators and spreading the knowledge amongst ourselves of how to do this. I'll stop there and let Jaap weigh in.
I don't have much to add. Maybe one thing, because I think that's important in light of this as well, is so how does the program come about? It's a mixture. So every year after we've hosted a consortium, as a steering committee, we get together and we start thinking about next year's consortium. And we'll have a couple of ideas based on what we hear, what is in our network, maybe a little bit our personal preferences. And so we'll put those into a file and send out a questionnaire to everybody in the consortium and ask them also to come up with their own ideas. And so based on all of the suggestions from members, but also based on what they think of the things that we propose, we usually get a pretty clear picture of what is sort of what the community wants, and that's how we try to put together the program to cater to that.
Great, thank you, Jaap. And that sort of is the bulk of our presentation. If you have any questions, we're happy to take them now.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that deep overview of so much activity in the working group and all pedagogically informed and rooted and obviously rich case studies. I will stop the recording and invite